Good morning, gentlemen. Nice talking to you. मैं आपके साथ एक बात करने वाला हूँ on very very important topic and that is India-China relations. और this is very important. आप जानते हो कि one Indian traveler who was from Arunachal Pradesh, वो जा रही थी from London to Tokyo and she had a stopover at Shanghai और वहाँ उसको 18 घंटे के लिए the Chinese stopped her there and harassed her and saying that Arunachal Pradesh is actually a part of China and you cannot be a citizen of. This incident has brought out the fact that the Chinese have really never reconciled or recognized the Indian border and they are claiming territories all over. They are not only claiming Northeast Frontier Agency, that is Arunachal Pradesh, they are also claiming Ladakh and Aksai Chin. Now let us examine what are the facts really. What do we believe in? Let us look at the historical aspect. One thing, the Chinese are very clear that India was a slave nation and whatever borders which have been demarcated now were done by the British. And India should not carry on the legacy of the British. Now there is some merit in this argument and the fact remains that most of these areas, that is the Aksai Chin or the Arunachal Pradesh, which was earlier known as NEFA, has never been under the control of any Indian king. I am not aware of any historical background to these. And this problem only started once the British came to India and they were very keen to expand and make the Indian borders viable and defensible, and hence they started this scheme of occupying areas in Tibet. That was after the invasion of Brigadier Younghusband in 1903 when the Tibetans were defeated. They also called a conference in 1913 in Shimla, which was attended by the emperor from China, his representative, and the Tibetans, but the emperor's representative did not sign the agreement and went away. So the fact is that the agreement was made, but the British shoved it down the throat of these people because they had the military power. And China's memory of India is basically of a mercenary army, that is the Tamils going and fighting in the Opium Wars and the Indian Punjab regiments going and fighting in the Boxer Rebellion. So the Chinese look at India as a colonial nation, a nation which was dominated by the British. And they can't understand why India should be always supporting those actions of the British which were imperialistic. Now, gentlemen, what exactly is the case? Now, as far as Ladakh is concerned and Aksai Chin is concerned, there is something called the Johnson Line. Now, India recognizes this as the border. While the British explorer Johnson had made this line, the British at one stage accepted this as the border between Tibet and India. But there was another explorer who went after that, and there's a second line, which I don't remember the name really, which is marked behind the Johnson line. And later the British said that is the border, and that means they forgot about the Johnson line. And they really didn't have any control over those areas. They had no control over these areas and they were not really very enthusiastic about them. They only had paper agreements. As far as the eastern border is concerned, most of the area there was under the control of the Chinese, that is the Tibetans at that time, and Tamang continued to be part of the Tibetan entourage. It was the second holiest shrine there. But the British in the conference in 1913 at Shimla, Henry McMahon, who was the chief secretary, took a pen and demarcated an area on the map. There was no physical verification, and they said this is going to be the border between Tibet and India. So it was an imperialistic order, and the Chinese, who were weak at that time, and the Tibetans couldn't do anything, and neither they could say we accept it. But at the same time, they didn't recognize it. They recorded their protests. But one thing I must make it very clear, that even after the British had demarcated the McMahon line, they made very little attempt really to expand their influence in the Northeast Frontier Agency. And as far as I know, right up to 1951, Tawang continued to pay taxes and levies to the Tibetan government in Lhasa. Now, later on, there was a major of the Assam Rifles who went and occupied that area, much to the chagrin of Nehru. He didn't like it. But the point is that Nehru, all this time, could not really decide how to face China. Now, this is one of the very sad portions of Indian history, that Nehru was a little lost as far as China is concerned. In fact, I am told that the 1954 maps, which were published by the Survey of India, showed the Ladakh border as undemarcated. That is what the maps say, the Indian maps. So if the border was undemarcated, how come the Indians accepted the Johnson line? I think in 1954 it was brought to the attention of Nehru, look sir, we must make our border and demarcate it on maps. So Nehru said, all right, we'll accept the Johnson line. And the Johnson line was made at the border. At the same time, he made no attempt to set up any administration there or a police post or an army post. And his reasoning was very simple. He said, ये तो सब barren area hai, nobody will go there. I mean, one could be that stupid, but that's precisely what happened. And as far as NEFA is concerned, the McMahon line, which was made by Henry McMahon, was not recognized by the Chinese, but it remained only on paper. And the British really didn't have much of control over those areas, and they were not interested. And Tibet was very weak at that time, so the Tibetans were not going to force anything, and China was weak, and Tibet remained a buffer. Now the British wanted Tibet as a buffer between China and India, and that's what they did. So gentlemen, आपको कुछ idea हो गया है कि India's claim जो है on this area is very weak. Actually, it was an imperialistic action by the British to expand India's borders. तो उन्होंने ये सब कर दिया, when actually no Indian king was having any control over these areas earlier. So the Chinese are pointing out the historical facts, you see. Till 1961 and even up to 81, China और India की economy जो थी was almost the same level पे. And 61 में Chinese were really scared of the American 7th Fleet, तो उन्होंने एक ऑफर दिया था इंडिया को, which India didn't accept, और ये एक बहुत बड़ी गलती कर दी इंडिया ने. They had offered that we will accept the McMahon line and you accept Aksai Chin as part of India, China. Nehru should have agreed, but he didn't agree because he was thinking he's a great third world leader, and he had people like Govind Vallabh Pant who didn't know much about politics, I mean at least strategic independence, and they didn't pursue the matter with the Chinese. 81, I believe the same proposal was presented again by the Chinese, but again it didn't go through. But after 2005, when China really went up, the Chinese now feel they are the masters of the region. Their economy is 5 times the size of India. Their military is very powerful. Their research is very powerful. Their trade with India is $100 in deficit as far as India is concerned, $1 million, $1 billion. And you can well imagine China is really going ahead, while India has been made to look like a slow-moving elephant. So gentlemen, these are the points we must bear in mind, that India's case is very weak here, and this is a historical process. So if you want to have a border settlement with China now, I think it has to be on the Chinese terms, because China is militarily very strong. And you can't fight a war with China and get away and say we will occupy Aksai Chin back and all that, which is a lot of bull. It's not going to happen. And even India will have to negotiate on the Arunachal border with China, because China says Tawang is very much part of China. So we'll have to watch and see what happens. And in the meanwhile, gentlemen, if you like my video, please share it with your friends, subscribe to my channel, and come back for more. So gentlemen, this incident which has taken place is just the tip of the iceberg. Angrez jo hai, they are not going to come back here again. So India has to solve the problem on their own. We have to have a border settlement with China. And you cannot have a border settlement with China by just doing nothing. So, gentlemen, I think I'll close now and say goodbye and God bless.